Erin, I see you.
Hello.
Trinidad, I see you. I know Samantha there. Trinidad's going to mute. Erin, I hear you. I'll just talk to you
All right.
while you're here.
Hi.
Oh, and there's Trinidad, and here comes Samantha. I see you guys. Hello, Samantha.
Hello.
Thank all of you, number one, for making time for all of us. There's probably a lot of questions from the audience as well, because it's the development community, and they want to hear from you who are doing the good work. Maybe if each of you could just sort of frame for them like the organizations that you lead, so they can sort of have that context, maybe some of the projects you're working on now, and we can sort of start there. And I'll just start with you, Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha Gorman. I'm the co-director, co-founder of Studio Tenderclaws. We're about 16 people now, roughly. Have gone remote in the last 2.5 months. We do a combination of art and tech work, but definitely we've done a lot more VR, AR games in our last few years. We did VVR, Tendar, and The Under Presents, which is the one that currently has about 30 live actors working in now since November. So that's definitely working from home in VR, and we can talk about that. I'm also the main narrative lead, narrative designer, and writer for the studio.
And we'll go to Erin.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Gordon, and the whole team for inviting me to be a part of this. This is so cool. I'm so excited to be here. So I am the founder and creative director of an indie game development studio called Flying Mollusk, and we focus on what we call edgy games for good. So games that are made to be really fun and interesting and kind of oriented for kind of more adult audiences, but also give back. They teach things that help foster skills. They're fun and beneficial. And we're most well known for a game called Nevermind, which helps people learn how to become more mindful of their fear and stress reactions by playing this adventure thriller game. Nevermind came out a few years ago, and currently we're now in various stages of pre-production on a couple of potential upcoming projects. So, kind of being in pre-production during this era of COVID is a interesting experience.
Well, we'll keep on that. So Erin, so if you can share, like what exactly, tell people like what you were trying to get done. A lot of people are very familiar with software development, product development. Tell me what you were trying to do when, end of February, the end of February as this became a reality.
Yeah, so we were juggling a lot of things the end of February. So we have a few projects that are kind of in the hopper. Some are early pre-production, so kind of working through the concept phase of it. One of our concept artists actually was already working remotely in New York. So we were kind of got a little bit of a head start on everyone for the remote working scenario. But yeah, end of February, we were really looking forward to the GDC where we were going to be pitching one of the projects. We had all these meetings lined up, and then, of course, GDC was canceled, which, especially in hindsight, was absolutely the right decision, but definitely kind of remixed our vision for what March would be in a big way. So, we adapted, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later, so I won't get into all of that right now, unless you want me to. But yeah, it was interesting times end of February.
How about you, Samantha? What were you, like, take us a little level of resolution. What were you in the middle of as GDC was approaching?
We're fortunate in that we had several projects that were getting underway. One of them we actually had started in December, and that is a long-term project for a game, and both VR and non-VR. And it's definitely a very intensive project. So, our whole team had been going on that full tilt, but the way that things impacted us here is the Under was still going on. So we had released the Under in November, and then our team of actors, they're working remotely in quests. So they were able to, even though we had a central hub where like we would meet up and direct them, over time they were taking their quests and able to work remote. But their schedules were always in flux depending on what shows they were in. But then when theaters closed, we found ourselves to be the main employers of all these people. So that actually had an interesting effect on changing our strategies for our next and upcoming projects. One of the other parts of the under is we were in the same way the cancellation of GDC, South by Southwest, all these things impacted us, is we were scheduled to showcase it in a bunch of different things up until mid-July. And in that case, we don't know of what that impact was. Like, we were going to be in the South by South Innovation Awards, and we had paid for the Airbnb and all the booth, and we were on our way there. So those things are you just will never know. But we ended up pivoting to another small project that's going to be launched very soon. That's a ticket-based theater experience. So we're trying to see what that model means for actors. And we propose that mainly to also help our actors stay employed until things open up. So there's been a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe talk a little bit about that, like how you pivoted just in practice and in person from the expectations and hopes, right? There was, you were headed to South by Southwest, whatever it may have been, it may have been. GDC, whatever it may have been, right? And you had to not only change what you're doing, like not just cancel those plans, but begin to make new ones without a lot of information, which is still happening to a lot of folks. And the reason I asked you to share that is because I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out that transition from this is what things were to this is what things are going to be. Like, how did you, I don't know, breathe in, and what was your process for getting towards where you are?
It's an interesting space for us because there's a trade-off, right? Where actually maybe the pros of things slowing down is I was no longer flying multiple times a month, but I was able to actually stay and focus on development and focus on what that pivot meant. And we were able to actually, as a time, it's, I think, actually a time that's really even brought our team closer together, because we are, I think, able to slow down a bit and like reassess, what it was we wanted to be doing and making together, and what that plan could be looking forward. It helps that we have the scaffolding of a long-term project already underway that, allowed us for that time to, kind of like slow down and figure out where we needed to be putting our energy. For me personally, it's very different. I think if you're an employee, an employer, or, in different creative fields. For me personally, it was actually probably really generative and helpful.
Erin, same question, because you were in a different phase. What I heard was you were in pre-production, maybe trying to go out to pitch, going to go get that money and really chart a strong in your head. What was your process, once again, from the expectations and plans of what could have been during that time period to taking in this information, and now this is what we are doing in the new world?
Yeah. So so when we got the news that GDC was not going to be happening, initially it was kind of like this moment of like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? We had all these meetings lined up for this, project we've been working really hard on for a year plus, and are we going to be able to pitch? Is the project dead? Like kind of all those thoughts that come up when plans drastically change, like the whole world changes overnight. But in the days following, it actually things sort of kind of balanced out, and all of our in-person meetings just became virtual meetings and Zoom meetings. And I had a little bit of anxiety going into that. It's like, oh my gosh, is the Zoom meeting going to be the same thing? You're not going to be able to have body language, like, interaction, reading people. You can't make eye contact. You can't really get into the vibe. Is it going to be so, unpersonal that like, it's just not going to work, kind of all of those feelings. But I found that I actually really enjoyed pitching on, digitally via Zoom or Skype or whatever the platform may be, because it almost became more humanizing. Unexpectedly, I found that it was sort of the opposite of what I had feared. There's something kind of fun about, just explaining this project that you're really excited and passionate about, and you still can read that energy from other people. And then, their dog walks in, or, my cat hops up on the table, and it's just like this really cool moment of like, at the end of the day, like we're all just people who are excited about cool projects. And I think, it sort of, it took out some of the formality of pitches, that can happen in settings like conferences or more the traditional settings. So it did end up looking very different than what we expected, but I think, the speed at which the industry, it seemed to adapt, at least in, that phase of things, was really quite impressive, and it worked out. I think it goes to show, I think, how flexible the game development community can be, and adaptive, and I found it kind of encouraging overall across the board.
Right on. And our third panelist is here, Trinidad. Please rejoin us. Welcome, Trinidad. So just to remind everyone, Trinidad is the head of diversity and inclusion for a little company called Niantic that's put together a few games, Ingress, Pokemon Go, Harry Potter, excitement. Welcome, Trinidad, and thank you for making time, like really making time. Trinidad's in a car making this work. Thank you, Trinidad.
Yes. I am in a car because there's no Wi-Fi in the house, and so I'm making this happen. But I am here for y'all. My name is Trinidad. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to partner with gay gaming professionals, and I just love people. I love empowering people with tools and resources. And I believe that the biggest thing as an ally that I can do is create access. And so that's why I'm here.
Well, maybe so Niantic, very big organization. A lot of people work at big organizations here. Talk about some of the challenges of bringing Niantic home, where you can't just call everybody and you're like, where you have to collectively bring, how big is Niantic? How many people are even there that had to make these transitions globally about?
We are over 500 people. So we're not a huge company, a huge studio. We do have offices in LA, Bellevue, London, Japan, and other places. So like in San Francisco. Oh yeah, San Francisco. I can't forget where I live. Anyways, but yeah, so I think the hardest part about going home is that we really do love collaboration, in-house collaboration, where we can get in a room and just beast mode it out. Like, especially if there's a problem, a roadblocker, having that ability just to all jump in. You see everybody's energy, you see people who are leaning in. Going home and going remote, it's a little bit, you have to be creative in how you interact with people who are introverted versus extroverted, creative with people who are, who the talkers are, people who are going to just own the room, and as a manager, as a leader, it's taking the time to really just say, what, I'm going to call individuals out, and I'm going to have more one-on-ones, and I'm going to check in more, and I may have more check-in time. So it's been a transition. But one thing that we've done at Niantic is a lot of manager training, also training that we're providing to just the community for health and wellness. Thanks to the guy who was on earlier, I loved his talk. And just thinking outside of the box. We are not used to this because we love we're in the Ferry building. We're like in the best places in all these places. So we love going inside and just hanging out and having free food and free snacks. So that's the petty shit. But, ultimately, I think it's just, we miss each other. It sounds so simple, but we just miss each other. And when you're irritated, I know I was irritated like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, bah, humbug. My roommate was getting on my nerves. My boyfriend was everybody was getting on my nerves. And I was just like, I have to remind myself that I am going through a pandemic, and that I have to give myself the space to breathe. And so having that like trigger in my brain to say, don't cuss your roommate out. It's not her fault. Stuff like that really goes a long way. And sometimes I just like say, I'm going to go to sleep and wake up tomorrow. But even with my coworkers, like, why is this person pinging me about this for 15 million times? Like, I said I would get back to them, and I have to, make sure my roommate's not talking too loud, make sure the dog goes out, all these different things that are happening that in the house. So just understanding all the different nuances, I think, is huge for a company.
Thank you so much. And so this first question, which is coming from Jasmine Aguilar, thank you. And I'm going to expand on it, Jasmine, because it's such a great question. The question is, how do you incorporate team bonding while working remotely? And I guess I'll sort of add to that, could you maybe talk about what you perceive to be your culture going into this? So you were talking about, oh, we have the cool locations and we're this, that, and the other. How do you preserve that culture and those expectations when you're sort of sharing someone's mind space with their family? Like, it's every day's bring your day to pet to work day, right? With their, possibly their kids, possibly their parents, right? How do you preserve culture and team bonding? And this is we'll start with you, Trinidad, because you were just talking, and I'll go right back to you, Samantha, and then you, Erin. Oh, if you muted.
There we go. Sorry.
Yes. No, no worries. No worries. No worries.
This is hard. Oh my gosh, I'm so.
It is, and we love and appreciate you. Everybody, we love and appreciate Trinidad. Period.
Stop. No. Can you repeat your question?
My question is this. Okay, the original question is, how do you have team bonding when everyone's work from home? My add to that was, how do you preserve the culture? Like, what did you think your culture was? You started talking about Niantic culture, and how do you preserve that when you're sharing that time space with families, pets, roommates, life?
So I think that the leadership at Niantic has done a really good job of understanding the different personas, right? The different people who are within the company that we're trying to meet the need. And the beauty of that is, some people want happy hours. Some people want like collective company happy hours. That's one thing that we've done. Some people just want questions and answers made. So we have a weekly question and answer time with our CEO. Some people want to do social distancing together in a way that is not, different. So they'll go for hikes and walks as a group. We have a Strega account. I don't know if y'all know what that is, but it's like this, like, it shows your time, it shows your miles, and you can like cheer people on, and some people are super competitive. So our CEO is in that Strega account, our head of design's in that Strega account. And so they're all like just building a community of people who are like going out for runs, walks, swims. So we're taking like the approach of seeing people as humans and saying, okay, how can we as a company make this easier for you, but also empower you with the tools that you need to work from home?
That's great. Samantha, same question.
In preparation, I actually, Cy Wise, who's an amazing human being and a friend, and kind of in our sister studio, she used to be one of the managers of Alchemy. She has this great Medium post about human-centric remote culture for working, and particularly AR VR studio, and I just posted it in the link. So hopefully that'll be of help to you guys. So some of the things she says, I think we found to be true as well. In our case, it's an interesting read because I think even in preserving culture, like there's relationships you have to people, or how you assume they work with the dynamic of other people, that's kind of turned on its head when it goes remote a bit. And in this particular case, we are trying to do, actually every week, we're doing screen shares, which has been actually super helpful because the artists and the devs get to see each other's work and get really, hyped about what each other are doing. And that's something that remote culture has instituted more, that maybe we didn't do as much in person because we could just assume, oh, you can just look over and see their screen. But actually setting up a formatted version of that is super helpful. Also, doing we do some happy hours, and like not everybody shows up to that, but it's surprising on the people who do show up to that. In this case, there's somebody who, and I think we may get into questions about management and helping to make sure your team's mental health is on track later on. But it's surprising, like there's an assumption I may have had about somebody, oh, they're not as into team culture and they're always quieter, but it turns out remotely maybe they need it or want it more than others. So it's been a really surprising but interesting learning position from a more management, leadership, or HR perspective.
Wow, thank you so much. And we're gonna get to here, and I swear, but that was just such kismet. So for everyone at home, our next event, which is going to be June 19th, our Power On Pride edition, is going to be a fireside chat with Cy Wise. Just saying. And so So we can get even more. We're going to go deeper into exactly what you're raising, Samantha. So true. Thanks to Oculus from Facebook. Back to Erin.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a very small team, and so in some ways, you know, we were able to, I think, maintain the culture somewhat seamlessly when moving remotely. Again, as I mentioned, you know, starting early in the year, before everyone was working remotely, our concept artist was already working remotely, so it's something we got a little bit of a head start on thinking about how do we make this work, and so, you know, we have a culture of being very you know, looking at each team member very holistically, you know, learning from each other every day. Our morning check-ins, you know, not only do we talk about like what we did yesterday, what we did today, we talk about one thing we learned as well, and it can be about the project and development that we're doing, or about just something cool that, you know, is interesting to each person. And so that translated really well remotely, and so we were kind of able to keep that energy as a through line as we all kind of worked remotely. But also the downside is that because we're such a small team, we're really used to having very close kind of collaboration and talking to each other all the time, you know, the tap on the shoulder, like, hey, can you look at this? Or, hey, like, what do you think about this? You know, and that organic collaboration was just really impossible to replicate. As far like, I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but we haven't figured that out yet. And that's one thing that we continue to be challenged by, is like, how do we continue to keep that you know, very organic and collaborative nature, where you don't need to schedule a meeting for every single conversation, which sort of formalizes things and might, as a result, have you miss out on those like creative kind of sparks and moments that just kind of come out of thin air, you know, that happen when you're all together. And so, you know, as I said, that's something that I don't have a good answer for yet. We're still working on. You know, we talked about things where like maybe we just have a camera that's always on, so that like everyone is sort of in the same virtual space together, but that feels very intrusive, especially when it's in your home, you know, and like you have your, you know, your roommates or your partners or whomever like walking by, and you know, so that's kind of, it's an interesting challenge. It really, really is. And I think it's something that I think we're all trying to figure out still, you know, using the tools we currently have. And I think there'll be tools in the future that will make this, you know, easier and solve some of these problems. So I'm optimistic about hopefully how this will all improve kind of, you know, in the weeks and months ahead, if we're still doing this in the weeks and months ahead.
No, and Erin, I want to stay with you. We had a broader question about how do you adapt to people's. We're gonna ask a very specific question. It's gonna come from Jivitesh in the crowd, which is this: if your team members or employees are facing economic uncertainty due to COVID, how do you help them manage that stress? And how do you manage the economic impact on your studios, if there is one?
It's a good question. I think that's something that we're all still trying to figure out, you know, and I don't know if I have a really good, you know, concrete answer to that, because it's a great question. And, you know, I think we are still trying to figure out sort of the economic impact and the resources that are out there, and everyone is different. Every studio situation is different. Every team member situation is different. And so I really think, especially now more than ever, there's no such thing as one size fits all when it comes to this. You know, I think it's really important to, you know, look at every single person on your team as an individual with individual circumstances, if you're not already kind of, you know, treating them that way as you should, and really kind of look at the situation holistically and kind of figure out what can you do with the resources that you have to help them out. And similarly with the studio, what can be done with the resources that are available to kind of keep things afloat, you know, and I think, you know, especially indies, you know, it's a time of a lot of uncertainty right now, and there's a lot of anxiety and fear, and no one really knows the answers. I know there's been a lot of really great resources and support out there, and so that there's reason to be optimistic, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and so we just kind of have to take every day as it comes and do the best we can for ourselves and each other at any given moment.
Same question to you, Samantha.
Yeah, you know, we're fortunate right now in that our studio is pretty stable, but and most of us are employees, and we, pay healthcare. But for the actors who are doing various shows and runs, that's one of the main factors why and how we chose our next project, is things that could enable them. We're announcing today that we're going to extend the live actors till September, end of September. So who could enable them to keep working through the remote, the extended call in California. In particular, there are a few actors who, one just had a baby, and, they're like, how we are able to provide, try to like keep them on stable shifts during that time is something that we're working through. It's an interesting thing also happened to us where I don't think we've talked about turnover during this time, but due to a circumstance in her life, we lost our main producer that we've had since the beginning about a month ago. And fortunately but she was the main person who dealt with all the actor scheduling, transitions, so how a culture of a company has adjusts for, personnel leaving due to COVID circumstances. And fortunately, we were able to, after a month transition, bring new people in, but there's still a lot of institutional knowledge that has to be, spread.
Sure. That sort of transitions to a question that all of you are probably addressing, which is, how do you onboard, and how do you give people time off in this time period? What do those two things even look like? I'll start with Trinidad right there. I see.
So we've gone to fully virtual onboarding, and thanks to Jenny, who is our wonderful HR person who has pivoted totally to we're working with IT to get them their laptops, make sure that they have their desks, and honestly, let's just take a step back and realize nobody's ever really had to do this in the time frame that we have. So kudos to Niantic's HR team for fucking killing it right now. Like, I'm pretty sure they need a vacay. One thing we're definitely doing is encouraging people that if, we have sick time, we have PTO. And I know that a lot of us don't want to take PTO during COVID because we're like, where are we going? But like, really analyzing your mental health, your physical health. If you don't feel okay, take a sick day, period. No other questions asked. And then also making sure that in our onboarding that the Niantic family comes together to make these people feel welcomed. So doing company-wide introductions, making sure that we have a Slack channel where we can welcome them. Fun facts, like we had to do a work from home guide. And so that's attached to that. Also how to set up your home ergonomically, everything, you name it. And I'm coming from the HR side. So if it sounds a little HRE, please forgive me. But ultimately, one thing that is amazing is that in such a short period of time, a company that has been working in the office has gone full work remote. And I want to acknowledge everybody who's worked hard to make that happen. It's taken long hours. Even with Pokemon Go, the whole team has went to crunch because we pivoted from, we do our battles in the gyms and we want people to get out and active. Like, that's the whole mission of our company, to get people into communities. And we're like, how do we still keep people in communities but safe? And so we've actually activated a remote battle feature, which is bogus and crazy and amazing. And I just don't know how they did that in like a month. So just out there, I don't know if I answered it and went on a tangent, but anyway.
It's okay. I'm curious from Erin and Samantha, you have your own studios. Same question of how are you bring people on if you are, and also how are you giving people time off? What does that look like now? And we'll start with you, Erin, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, time off especially is very difficult, as it's come up a few times during this event. Just when it's hard to have a work-life balance when work and life is kind of like together in space and time. And so, like at Flying Mollusk, like our policy is if anyone needs time off for whatever reason whatsoever, they can have it. It's there for them and their health and mentally, physically, in all aspects is most important. And so that obviously is continued. And so, there are a few times when folks needed a little extra time for whatever reason. So, great. And what's nice about working from home in a way is that there's more flexibility. Some of the feedback I got from the team is that they did enjoy that additional flexibility of being able to move hours around if they needed to as well. And so that's great. But yeah, that's something that honestly, I'm struggling with is how do I take time off? Because it just feels like you can't leave your personal baggage at home, go to the office, kill it, and then come home and deal with the rest of the stuff. It's like everything is sort of traffic jamming together. And how do you sort that out? And, I think a lot of the suggestions that Jason had earlier were really valuable, in terms of making a schedule and really, and as well as Abby about the, the me day, I think there's a lot of really good, valuable advice out there. And so it just comes back to mental health, making sure you're taking care of yourself, making sure you're advocating for yourself to your company and communicating when you need time. And we're all learning this together. So, figuring that out may be a rocky road for the next few weeks as we kind of, figure out how do we, do the work-life balance? How do we take days off? How do we manage all of that? It's kind of, we're all learning this as we go along together.
Samantha, same question.
Sure. I think I know there was a two-parter. The time off one is the part I remember, so I can answer that first. We do have a PTO, and I believe I'm not in the HR and production, but I think there's a COVID-related aspect to health law in California now that's being looked at, but I don't know off the top of my head how that affects or impacts small and large businesses yet. So that is something that I think may be worth, if people are interested, looking into what that is and if that exists. In terms of us, because we're small enough, we're pretty flexible. But since we've been remote, I think we've decided that we should maybe even think about going down to a 4-hour workday in the future. Is something that we're, debating now that we've seen how things could work remote. And also having either that or having one of those days be a remote day if people would prefer that for flexibility.
Even more specific development question, I want to stay with you, Samantha. How are you doing testing? And this actually came from the group. Let me give credit.
Yeah.
Sorry, wait. Margaret Moser, Unity guru and USC professor, who I adore. How do you play test your VR projects when you can't bring players in?
Yeah, so this is actually really relevant for us. So in our particular case, there's three levels to this, and I'll very quickly. One is we have an in-house QA person. So that's QA, that's not necessarily players, but we have an active Discord group in our, when we were doing Variety Hour, which we made to give actors more shifts, so they're doing special performances on Friday and Saturday in May, we actually had some of the Discord, we alerted them that this was gonna happen and that they had special early notice of it, so that we were able to actually go in and they're really active also in giving actor feedback or things they're finding fun. That's one of the elements. For the ticketed project we have coming up, because everybody has quests and can work remotely, we have a player and actor networked build. It's actually, we've developed a system over the last year that will allow us to all communicate and meet up in VR. And most recently, what's relevant to this question is we actually just had a rehearsal with 11 actors in VR to test the build for the new actor build for the first time. And how we did that was we had a Zoom open and we had some of the moderators unmuted so they could communicate while different subsets of actors were meeting up in different rooms, and the moderators and directors could pop in between those rooms in VR, but also speak on Zoom so people could unmute and mute themselves. Because it's a logistical, there's always patterns, interestingly.
That is so true. So Samantha, real talk. We're like in Zoom and Discord and all the things, Facebook right now making this
Yeah.
happen. So I am feeling your answer. I want to ask you, Erin, the same question. I'm going to conclude with the question you, Trinidad. But Erin, same thing. How are you just testing the basic blocking and tackling?
Yeah, so I mean, we're in pre-production now, so testing isn't as much of a concern right now, fortunately for us, as it will be once we kind of roll into full-on production. And so we're kind of already thinking ahead of like, okay, let's assume that things are not going to change in any significant way for the next year or so. What is production going to look like? What is testing going to look like? You know, for VR, does every single developer need to have their own headset now? Because like traditionally, we're a small enough team that we can totally get by with one headset in the studio. But now, you know, if we're all working from home, then everyone will need a headset. Or if we're at the studio, probably everyone should still have their own headset just because germs now are a thing we're all hyper aware of, you know? And so how do we solve these problems? It's a whole new challenge. And you know, I think it's just something that we're going to have to build into the production plan and you know, figure out a testing plan from the ground up. And again, I feel fortunate because we have a small team, so it's a little bit easier, and we have a little bit of lead time to all this so that we can build the production plan with this in mind instead of having to pivot. So it's interesting times.
Interesting times indeed. We have a question. We're almost done here. Jonathan Lowe, I'm not going to not ask your question, and we may answer it either here or later because we in fact have two experts from Niantic today, but I'll pose it to you, Trinidad. Jonathan is a level 34 Pokemon Go trainer. I think that's very high. I suspect that's a high number. He's curious about Niantic's third-party developer fund. Is there a place to point developers who are looking to work closer with Niantic?
So we did an actual, what was it called? A competition. Yes, it's called the XYZ contest last year. And we asked third-party developers to get on our platform. And I'm sure Marigold will talk more about this later on, but like, it was one of the most fascinating things to watch from someone who's not a developer, that there's like mom and pop like developers like in their garage, like a daughter, like there's one that's like a family, some friends. And we last year socialized that at GDC, we socialized it at E3, and right now, if you are a third-party developer and you're interested in developing on our real-world platform, I'm going to put out Kelly Santiago's name. She'll probably hate me, but anyways, hit her up on LinkedIn. She's amazing. And honestly, she's taking this whole project and trying to get people from all over, different backgrounds. And it's called it's definitely some, by the way, I'll put like a link to the developers that won in the chat after, but 10 teams got funding to develop on our platform, and
Wow.
they competed for not only money, but you know, maybe one of them got acquired, you know what I mean? Like, you know, a little something. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities to develop on our real world platform. Obviously, you know, we spun out of Google, you think Google Earth, you think Google Maps. Like, this is why we like to definitely navigate the real world that we live in. So there was also a conference last year called Augmenting Cities. Niantic is very, very into looking into how we can augment the cities that we live in with history, with just you know, our cities are developing so rapidly over the years, and there's so much wealth of knowledge and history in it. So those are a little something.
Wow, and what a happy, so number one, we're going to keep the trains running on time because number one of all this, if you learned nothing else today, self-care. We all need breaks, period. So I want to thank all of you for making time. I want everyone to know that we're going to provide their contact info like in the slides later, because these are all related. You should follow up with these very smart people. They all help you be your best selves. But I just want to thank Samantha, Erin, and Trinidad. Thank you. I thank all of you in this time for, like, you know, just sharing and just caring about our development community. Super, super duper duper mega appreciate it.